Let's do some thinking together. Last Sunday, as I'm hoping you will recall, we thought about the topic of racial justice in general terms. We sketched out some of the history of empires which do tend to collapse under the weight of exploitation. This week, at the start of Fairtrade Fortnight, I'm inviting us to focus on one way in which we can, together, do at least something about the racial and economic injustice in the world. You'll know, I'm sure, that I have strong connections to Africa as a canon of 2 cathedrals in Ghana, as well as in Portsmouth Cathedral, of course. I've also spent some time in Uganda studying the work of missionaries from the Church Mission Society. As a result, I, and sometimes Claire, and sometimes Emily too, have had the amazing experience of spending time in wild African places. I've had the privilege of seeking out the elusive shoebill on the banks of the Ugandan Nile. I've sat near a waterfall in Ghana and listened to choruses of birds whose names I could only guess. I've watched crocodiles sunbathing and hippos mud-bathing. And I've watched jostling wildebeest at the waterhole, pushing smaller animals out of the way as they make their way down to the water. So much of this beauty that I've been so fortunate to experience is under threat, isn't it? But it's not just the wild places of the earth which are in danger. It's also the lives of the workers and the farmers in places like Africa, as well as South America and the entire Indian subcontinent and many other places. And that's because the wildebeest of the industrial countries have a tendency to jostle at the metaphorical waterholes of the world, don't they? The biggest, strongest, fattest companies tend to push all the little people aside to get to the good stuff. They step on the little farmer. They push down the small trader. They buy up vast swathes of land, tear down ecological diversity, displace indigenous farmers, and fill the land with monoculture plantations. One of the hardest facts to get your head around is that these farmers and workers who teeter on the edge of destruction are so often the ones who have in fact contributed least to the climate emergency that is affecting them. Many indigenous farmers, they know their land. Their techniques are often deeply eco-aware. In Uganda, Claire and Emily and I witnessed a farming project led by those CMS missionaries, which taught people how to rotate their crops properly, how to manure their soil, how to maintain long-term practices of eco-farming, what we used to call farming in the old days, in balance with nature. But you know, somehow our economic system forces people across the world to ignore that indigenous knowledge in pursuit of profits for multinational corporations. Such corporations are able to scale up the task of farming to such an extent that their products can be sold so much more cheaply than the indigenously produced food. And they do it, don't they, by ploughing up forests, planting monoculture fields, which quickly then become unproductive. So more forest has to be cut down, more land has to be ploughed over, and ever more environmental catastrophe has to be created. Indigenous farmers find they can't sell their expensive, well-produced, sustainable food, and so they go out of business. In desperation to feed their families, they end up taking jobs with the multinationals. and the spiral of decay continues. What can we do about this, my brothers and sisters? Us, here and now, in this church, today. Well, one of the very few ways that we have at our disposal to address these wrongs is to choose fair trade. That is how, in the short term at any rate, we can work to improve the livelihoods of farmers and producers in those poorest places of the world. We also know that buying fair trade can assist farmers in their environmental adaptation where they need it. Fair trade tries to provide farmers with a decent standard of living, enough to cover all their farming costs and to cover their basic human rights, like having a nutritious diet, or their children being able to have education and health care. Now, I know what some of you may say. I've said it myself. We say, but fair trade food tastes different, or it tastes funny. In fact, I know of an organisation not too far from here which has a fair trade coffee tin, but it's only the tin. They actually buy commercially produced coffee to put in the fair trade tin. Their coffee drinkers think that they're supporting fair trade, but actually they're just drinking the same old commercially produced cheap stuff. When I challenged that organisation on their practice, I was told, well, no one likes the taste of that fair trade stuff. Taste is, of course, acquired, isn't it? Over the first 30 years of our marriage, Claire always took sugar in her tea, didn't you, dear? Yeah. But one day, about 5 years ago, she decided to give up having sugar in her tea. And now, she wouldn't even sip a cup of tea that had got sugar in it. Bleh, she would say, or words to that effect. We can teach ourselves, can't we, to accept new tastes, different textures, if we are convinced enough of the good reasons for doing it. Something else we tend to say is, well, this fair trade food, it's more expensive. It's too expensive. Really? Expensive compared to what? How does the extra few quid here and there on fair trade food or a jar of coffee compared to what we spend, I don't know, in Costa on a single cup of coffee? Or how much we spend on our holidays or our kitchen refurbishments or our new cars or our gardening products? Too expensive? Really? Is that why you choose the cheaper, commercially produced, ecology-destroying coffee when you get to the supermarket shelf? In the reading that Sue did so brilliantly just now from the letter of James, James reminds us that faith by itself, if it has no works, no deeds, is dead. Now, there are many ways of working out our faith through good deeds, but surely one of the easiest ways is to make some kind choices when we walk along the supermarket shelves. Perhaps those fair trade bananas are a pound or two more than the other ones. Make the sacrifice. Perhaps the jar of fair trade coffee or the packet of fair trade chocolate won't taste the same as your normal choice. Make the sacrifice. Know that as you do, you're helping to change a life. You're helping a farmer keep going or her fields sustainable. You're helping to dig a well for her village or provide a school for her children. So when you depart from here today, when you charge over to Waitrose for your Sunday shopping, Please be kind. We often talk, don't we, about how the wealthiest of the world should pay a little more to help the poorest. You and I, we are among the wealthiest in the world. Let's be kind. Let's put our faith into action. Let's do justly and love mercy, as the prophet says. Let's not be the wildebeest who trample on others to get to the waterhole. Let's choose fair trade. Amen? Amen.